These absolutely fill your room with tight detailed bass. They're built, I would say, pretty rock solid. It's a well thought out bracing system within, and they scale tremendously with power, and they're very blue. What more do you want? Well, maybe you don't want blue, maybe you want a clean walnut veneer, or possibly zebra stripes. Frankly, it doesn't really matter. If you're not aware, CSS offers what I consider the best DIY speaker kits on the market, where you can finish these as you desire. And if you're not looking for a project, they can also be purchased completely finished as well, like this one came today. I didn't get to build this pair, but I have no shortage of experience with CSS speakers. First I did the Tory, and I was able to play with their enclosure shape a touch. I was mixing paint, veneer. It was really a fun project. Then I went on to the 3TD-X, where I attempted a guitar style finish with some really nice curly maple veneer. I personally feel like that one turned out fantastic. It's still a very professional look, but it's really unique compared to a lot of the other common finishes on the market. Lastly, I'm actually building out their bass modules to pair with the 3TD-X, which I really do need to wrap up that video and get it out to all of you. More on that sooner than later. All that being said, I've had a lot of experience with the company, so when they reached out and offered up the 3TD-X for review, I did jump on the opportunity. If you haven't heard of CSS or Creative Sound Solutions, or you've ever been curious about whether these DIY-friendly speakers can really hang with the big names, stay with me here. I have a lot of thoughts on this one. And flat out, the 3TD-X is something special, and after comparing them to a bunch of other speakers that I've owned and heard, I think they're a fantastic option at their price point, even more so if you can build these from the kit. Now I'm going to give you guys a quick background, and I do feel this is important. It's nice to know where a product's coming from, or in this case, who's making it. And me personally, I like to support good people and people that I like, and I think this is one of those cases. CSS, Creative Sound Solutions, is based in Michigan. The company was originally founded by Bob Reamer, but in 2017, two friends named Carrie and Dan took over this whole thing. Together, they took what was primarily a speaker parts company, and they evolved it into something very much more like we're seeing today. What I really appreciate about their approach is they're not trying to be an exclusive boutique brand. They designed really well-engineered speaker kits that you can either build yourself if you want the hands-on experience, which I really enjoy, or you can buy fully assembled if you just want great speakers and you don't own, some of the woodworking tools, for example. You won't find any gatekeeping here or snobbery. It just really seems like two down-to-earth guys who enjoy speakers, which I think that's a lot of us. The 3TD-X is their flagship tower. It's a three-way design, hence the 3 in the naming system, using their LD25X tweeter up top, an LDW6 mid-range driver, and two LDW7 woofers handling the bass. It measures about 41 inches tall, weighs around 70 pounds each when assembled, and has a nominal impedance of 4 ohms with a sensitivity of about 88 decibels. What's kind of cool about these drivers mentioned is they don't use off-the-shelf options like a lot of kits or finished goods do. These are custom tailored for the designs, and I think that has to have an impact here. Now, they recommend anywhere from 30 to 300 watts of amplification, which gives you a sense of how scalable these are, or potentially how scalable these are. And we'll get into that in a minute because it really did make a difference in my experience. Like I mentioned, the 3TD-X comes as a kit, but CSS also sells them fully finished for around $5,500 for a pair. In a custom finish like the ones here, I believe that's an additional $500, which in today's market is honestly not that bad for a speaker design of this caliber. Building it and finishing it yourself does take substantial time, but it will save you a lot of money. It's $2,500 for a complete kit with their standard crossover options. I've always thought their kits are really thoughtfully put together. You get all the drivers, the flat pack cabinets that are really well cut, everything goes together really smoothly. Internal bracing, dampening material, binding posts, wire, it's really everything. You just need the tools. If you can follow simple instructions and handle basic tools, you can build these. The crossover comes with a simple and clean board labeled for essentially matching your A's to A's, B's to B's, etc. for the wiring. If you're all worried about this, just check out either my Tory or my 3TD-X build series. It's a really simple process and something I find to be really enjoyable. If you're familiar with CSS, you probably know about the 3TD-X that I mentioned. That's their smaller two-way bookshelf, and it became kind of like a cult favorite because it punches way above its weight class, at least in my opinion. When these first came out, and I'm sure people are still doing this, they were putting them up against speakers costing 2 to 3 times as much, and they were coming away impressed in a lot of these cases. It's simply voiced in a way that a lot of people really enjoy. The 3TD-X takes everything that made the 3TD-X great, that natural tonal balance, the smooth tweeter, the way it just gets out of the way of the music, and expands on it in a bigger, bolder way. More bass extension, more dynamic capability, and just more scale. I feel like it's the same design philosophy with more headroom and obviously a lot more bottom end. If you loved the 1TD-X but you just wanted more, this delivers exactly that experience. And if you're new to CSS and have space and budget for a larger tower like this is a great entry point. Okay, so about the bass, this is where the 3TD-X really announces itself. Those two 7-inch woofers working together, they move some serious air, and it's going to be something you immediately notice. The frequency response goes down to 30 Hz and in room around 20 Hz. You're getting legitimate sub bass that most tower speakers just can't reproduce. It's certainly leaning into the no sub required space, but if I'm being honest, I nearly always prefer a well-matched sub or two, no matter the speaker capabilities. Teach their own, right? So I threw on Audioslave like a stone, and the bass line just fills the room. Tim Comerford, who was formerly the Rage Against the Machine bassist, is a little more restrained with Audioslave here, but he still gives us a nice attack in the bass line that demonstrates how clean and notably how well this crossover to driver combination can handle that dynamic range. Another fun example is Bush's Glycerine. It's sort of a surprising track because the bass line doesn't drop in for a bit there, but when it does, there's a lot of deep presence in your room. The 3TD-X handles it with ease and provides a nice layer of warmth that a lot of other speakers just can't replicate without an additional sub. It also scales really well with music. You put on some jazz with an upright bass and it sounds natural and present. Switch to electronic music or hip hop and suddenly you're getting those sub bass frequencies that usually require that subwoofer. Not to the same degree as a dedicated pair of subs obviously, but it's legit low end performance for a pair of speakers. Just to point this out because I think it's important for reviewers to let people know their preferences so that they can better judge their observations. I do like bass, but I'm not a bass head where I overpower a system. But I do like a full range presence properly tuned with the speakers. I found while picking songs to demo this one, I just kept putting on these bass heavy tracks just to hear what these speakers do. If bass is important to you or you're possibly a sub-optional user, you're going to have a great time with the 3TD-X. The mid-range on these speakers is a touch forward, but in the best way. It grabs your attention without being aggressive or fatiguing. Vocals sit right in front of you with presence and body. Guitars have texture. Piano notes have weight. The crossover points are at 300 Hz and 2700 Hz, and that dedicated LDW6 mid-range driver really seems to make a difference on these. Vocals come through with this natural quality that's engaging, but never overly analytical or clinical. I've been listening to a ton of different stuff with these. If you want to discuss newer things like Noah Kahan's vocals, they come through with all that emotional rawness that he tends to have. Camp's layered acoustic guitars sound so spacious, and bands like Soundgarden still have that grit and power that so many people like. The mid-range constantly delivers on these. It's not polite or laid back, it's just kind of what it is. These speakers just want you to pay attention to the music, and the mid-range is a big part of why, which might sort of come as a surprise to a lot of people, because usually when you hear about these, it's mostly just about the bass. A little bit more on that sound. You know how there's some speakers that just sound a little bit lean? Oftentimes it's smaller bookshelf speakers, but it happens on floor standing models too. You're just sort of always aware there's this whole bottom octave missing. And really you kind of need a subwoofer to feel a little bit complete there. When you set these up in your room, I would guess a lot of you could just be done. The bass extension, the weight, the foundation, it's really all there. Now, if you're doing serious home theater and you want that tactile style bass where you can really feel it, you're gonna need to add a sub or two. But for 2-channel music, for a lot of people, I would say this is gonna be enough. I'm still gonna push a sub here, but I could get by without it on these if I had to. Here's something that speaks to how well CSS designed these. They scale really well with different amplification. I started with a modest Weem VibeLink amp. It's a solid little budget-friendly design, perfectly fine for a lot of different pairings, and this was no different. It did sound good here, clear, engaging, musical, but I had a strong suspicion the amp was holding back a speaker like this. But then I connected them to the Cambridge EXA100, which really opened things up on this moderately difficult to drive speaker. It's not just about playing louder, it's about control, dynamics, that sense of effortlessness when music starts to get complex or demanding. I kept it going and went up to the insanely powerful Hagel H600, which puts out around 300 watts per channel at 8 and 600 at 4. And yeah, it didn't disappoint at all, but from my testing, the sweet spot was right around that EXA100 area. There was still room to grow there, but it gets you most of the way there. It's really good to see how easily these speakers could grow with your system. You can start with moderate amplification and upgrade later. And the 3TD-X, it's going to show you exactly what you're getting for your money. But here's the thing that matters most to me, and honestly, it's hard to put into words without sounding cheesy or like some kind of delusional audiophile. These speakers make me forget about the equipment. It was very much so a music-first experience where no matter the song, it really seemed to connect with me. The soundstage and depth these produce is pretty wild if I'm being honest. If you close your eyes, it feels as if the soundstage is coming in from the entire front stage all at once, as well as above and around it. Is all of this possibly just a byproduct of the voicing CSS accomplished here? Maybe it's the slightly forward mid-range that's balanced with the deep bass performance, and that's all just keeping things in check. I'm not entirely positive. It's a bit challenging to describe as it's a detailed sounding speaker, but it's matched up with the right level of warmth that keeps even the bad recordings going at a high volume. Look, the CSS 3TD-X is a really fun yet capable speaker. If you're coming from the 1TD-X and want more bass, more scale, more dynamic capability, this one does deliver. If you're shopping around and considering speakers from bigger names at higher price points, do yourself a favor and at least listen to what CSS has to offer, especially if you're interested in the DIY designs. There's a lot of great value in those kits. If these weren't just a review sample going back out, I could easily keep these in the rotation in my listening space, and I think that says enough here. And yes, I will get you guys that video on the bass modules. I promise it's coming. The hard part there is recreating that guitar finish I did on the 1TD-X bookshelves so I can make this a matching set. And if you could, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps to push these videos to a wider audience. Take care, talk soon, later.